Hi everyone. I'm Lino. Sorry that I have to cover my face and use AI voiceover. I live in an environment with heavy censorship, and even accessing YouTube is considered illegal. Not to mention the fact that I sometimes criticize certain actions of the government. Here, if your views don't align with the mainstream narrative, you live in fear, so I have no choice but to protect myself. A few days ago, we talked about the story of the US's death line. In the eyes of the little pinks, many people simply don't have money to see a doctor. It seems that China is far ahead of the West. But is that really the case? In today's video, I want to talk about a topic that millions of ordinary people in China cannot avoid. Yet very few truly have the power to change. That topic is the lack of sufficient public investment in healthcare and the very real consequences it brings to ordinary families. On paper, China's basic medical insurance system claims to cover more than 90% of the population. That sounds impressive. It even feels like a success story. But coverage is not the same thing as protection. And when a real illness happens, when someone actually walks into a hospital and faces treatment decisions, and faces the bill, many people suddenly realize just how fragile they really are. Part 1: Low government spending, high personal burden. Let's start from the big picture. In 2021, China's total health expenditure was only about 6.5% of GDP. Even in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, when healthcare costs were already rising. Meanwhile, in many European countries, that figure is around 10%. And when the government spends less on healthcare, the result is simple. Families have to spend more themselves. Government spending accounts for only a little over a quarter of total medical costs, while personal out-of-pocket spending is still close to 28%. In many developed countries, 80 to 90% of healthcare spending is publicly funded. Individuals pay only a small fraction. So on the surface, the coverage rate is high, but the level of protection is thin. The lights in the hospital are on. But the cost? Most of it still falls onto the patient. Part 2: The hidden financial kill line in the insurance system. Now let's look at how the insurance system is designed. In many countries, insurance policies are built around a maximum out-of-pocket limit. Once a patient pays up to that limit in a year, everything beyond it is covered. But in China, the logic is flipped. The system sets a maximum reimbursement cap, meaning there is a ceiling on how much the insurance will pay. If the reimbursement cap is, say, 500,000 yuan a year, but your treatment costs 2 million, then the remaining 1.5 million is entirely on you and your family. And that creates an invisible but deadly threshold, a financial kill line. Those who can afford it survive. Those who can't are pushed into collapse. Even worse, many life-saving imported drugs and advanced treatments are not covered by insurance at all. So people are left in a cruel reality. Minor illnesses are manageable. Major illnesses ruin families. Part 3: A moment from my own experience. At this point, I want to share a small personal experience. Once, I went to a hospital for treatment. The doctor prescribed a cheap Western antibiotic. It cost only a few cents. But along with it, I was given a package of extremely expensive traditional Chinese patent medicines. In that moment, it became very clear to me. The cheap Western medicine represented the actual medical effect, and the expensive Chinese medicine represented the hospital's profit. That sharp contrast was uncomfortable, and it made me realize something deeper. Economic incentives have reshaped medical behavior. Part 4: The people standing on the front line. And the people who suffer most from this system are not the privileged. They are rural families, flexible workers, the elderly, and ordinary middle-class households. Data shows that illness remains the leading cause of poverty and financial collapse in many Chinese families. Among middle-aged and elderly households, the rate of catastrophic health spending is over 20%. That means, out of every 5 families, one may have their entire life destroyed by hospital bills. Many elderly people avoid seeing a doctor even when they're sick. They drag on until late stages of illness or simply give up treatment entirely. Not because they don't value life, but because they can't afford to. Part 5. When the state cannot catch you, society begins to self-rescue. And then we see a familiar social phenomenon. Fundraising links fill people's social circles. Medical crowdfunding pages circulate among friends. One side says, "We have universal health care." The other side says, "Please help, we cannot afford treatment." In some cities, parents take their sick children onto the streets to perform or to beg for medical expenses. This is not individual misfortune anymore. This is what happens when a social safety net fails to catch people. Part 6. Inequality and institutional coldness. Meanwhile, healthcare resources are still unevenly distributed. Premium medical resources are concentrated among a small elite. Ordinary patients face long queues, high costs, and high uncertainty. Hospitals under financial pressure begin to commercialize treatment. More tests than necessary, more expensive medications, surgeries performed whenever possible. And in extreme cases, patients who cannot pay are delayed, refused, or abandoned. In a system dominated by financial incentives, medical ethics are constantly being squeezed by structural pressure. Part 7. A systemic problem, not just a medical one. If we use a metaphor, in many developed countries, healthcare is like a locked safety umbrella, imperfect, but still able to protect you in heavy rain. China's system, however, is more like a raincoat that looks fine on the surface, but splits apart at the seams when the storm gets heavy. It works in light rain, but when serious illness strikes, the protection collapses instantly. And for many families, that moment becomes the dividing line of their lives. Illness itself is already cruel. But what is even more cruel is when illness does not just defeat a person, it destroys an entire family. And when a healthcare system cannot truly function as a safety net, every ordinary person may one day find themselves standing right on the edge of that financial kill line. Thank you for watching.